The story begins with a group of mercenaries holding hostage one of the best hackers in America, a man named Scott. The leader of this mercenary group, Frost, wastes no time and immediately questions Scott about the whereabouts of two briefcases that had been stolen from the government. At first, Scott refuses to reveal any information, knowing that if the briefcases fall into Frost's hands, chaos will inevitably follow. However, Frost threatens him, promising to slaughter his family if he does not cooperate. Left with no choice, Scott finally confesses that the briefcases are in separate locations. The first one is in California, while the second is stored at a luggage deposit facility. With this information, Frost immediately orders his right-hand man to retrieve the briefcase from California, while he and the remaining mercenaries head to the luggage deposit facility to secure the other one. That night, two of Frost's most skilled subordinates, Johnny and Nico, are seen sparring outside their base. After finishing their training session, Johnny turns to Nico and asks about the contents of the two briefcases that Frost is after. Nico admits that he doesn't know and believes it's best they remain ignorant. However, Johnny can't shake off Scott's warning that if both briefcases fall into Frost's hands, it would result in catastrophic consequences. Concerned about the potential loss of innocent lives, Johnny expresses his fears. Nico, on the other hand, remains indifferent, stating that as long as they are well paid by Frost, he doesn't care about the aftermath. The next day, Frost and his team prepare to retrieve the briefcase from the luggage deposit facility. He instructs Nico and 3 other mercenaries to disguise themselves as office workers in case things go south. At the same time, Scott, Johnny, and Frost will enter the facility to collect the briefcase themselves. With everyone clear on their roles, the team proceeds with their mission. Once inside, Scott, escorted by Frost and Johnny, approaches a staff member to request the retrieval of the briefcase. The staff member is momentarily puzzled, questioning why Scott is suddenly claiming the briefcase when he originally stored it for the next 3 years. Thinking quickly, Scott lies, explaining that there is something crucial inside that he needs to retrieve immediately. Fortunately, the staff member does not press the issue further and hands over the briefcase. Meanwhile, a man named Flynn, who happens to be at the same facility retrieving his own belongings, notices something unusual about a few of the disguised office workers. Suspicious, he decides to keep an eye on them. As he heads upstairs, Flynn crosses paths with Frost and his team, who are exiting the facility with the briefcase in hand. One of Frost's men informs him that Flynn has been following them for some time. Realizing the threat, Frost orders his men to eliminate Flynn, leading to a chase and an intense fight. Back with Frost, Johnny, and Scott, as they make their way to the elevator with the briefcase in their possession, Johnny suddenly snatches it from Frost. A fierce battle breaks out between the two, both proving to be formidable fighters. However, in the end, Johnny manages to escape with the briefcase. Wasting no time, Frost contacts Nico and orders him to hunt down Johnny, who has betrayed them. Moments later, Johnny reaches the basement, clutching the briefcase tightly. But before he can flee, Nico intercepts him and demands to know what he is doing. Johnny explains that he cannot allow the briefcase to fall into Frost's hands, as it would lead to disaster. He urges Nico to join him, but Nico refuses, and a battle ensues. Despite Nico's efforts, Johnny overpowers him and escapes, leaving Nico lying on the ground. Seizing the moment, Johnny dashes out, but unfortunately, he is pursued by Flynn, leading to a tense chase. Despite his efforts to escape, Johnny finds himself cornered. At that moment, Flynn attempts to explain something, but Johnny, assuming that Flynn is trying to steal the briefcase, attacks without hesitation. In the end, Johnny overpowers Flynn and flees with the briefcase. At this point, Flynn's true identity and the contents of the highly sought-after briefcase remain unknown. Meanwhile, Frost gathers all his subordinates and questions them about the identity of the mysterious man who attacked them and the reason behind Johnny's betrayal. One of Frost's men, Jewel, admits that they have no information on the attacker. However, regarding Johnny, Jewel believes that he may be hiding in his apartment and volunteers to capture him. As a result, Frost orders Jewel to apprehend Johnny immediately. 30 minutes later, Johnny is seen in his apartment, hurriedly packing his belongings. Just as he is about to leave, Jewel bursts in and launches an attack. In the midst of their battle, Flynn suddenly arrives and intervenes, aiding Johnny. Initially, Johnny prepares to strike Flynn, but Flynn quickly clarifies that he is not an enemy and is actually on Johnny's side. After subduing and restraining Jewel, Flynn reveals that he is a government secret agent. He explains that he had been suspicious of Frost's group after spotting them at the luggage deposit facility. Flynn then questions Johnny about his betrayal and the stolen briefcase. Johnny confesses that Frost plans to use the briefcase to incite large-scale chaos, though he himself is still unaware of its exact contents. Without wasting any time, Flynn suggests that they open the briefcase together at his safe house. Meanwhile, Frost's right-hand woman, Anya, has successfully retrieved the first briefcase in California. She contacts Frost to report the completion of her mission. However, upon hearing the news, Frost informs her that their mission at the luggage facility has gone awry due to Johnny's betrayal. He orders Anya to return immediately and assist in capturing Johnny. Anya agrees and sets off at once. Later, at Flynn's safe house, Johnny and Flynn finally open the briefcase, revealing a processor inside. Confused as to why Frost desires it so desperately, they examine it further. Flynn, uncertain of its purpose, suddenly remembers a trusted IT specialist from his agency. As a result, he contacts his expert friend and asks him to come over immediately. Elsewhere, Nico, one of Frost's subordinates, along with another team member, is seen torturing Scott. At that moment, Scott questions why they continue to torment him when he has already provided everything Frost demanded. However, Nico coldly replies that they will not stop until Scott locates the missing briefcase. Realizing he has no other choice, Scott agrees to cooperate, but only if he is given a laptop. An hour later, Scott is seen working on the laptop, attempting to track the briefcase's location. However, he appears drowsy, prompting an angry outburst from Nico's companion. Scott then explains that they must first wait for the processor inside the briefcase to be activated before they can determine its location. Unwilling to sit idly by, Frost orders Nico, Jewel, and another subordinate to search for Johnny at his usual haunts. Frost is convinced that Johnny is still in the city and hasn't gotten far. Elsewhere, Johnny and Flynn were still waiting for their friend to unlock the contents of the processor. Before long, Flynn's friend, Gray, arrived. Flynn immediately welcomed him inside and handed over the processor. Without wasting any time, Gray connected the processor to his laptop and began examining it. However, what he discovered left him in shock. Inside the processor was a virus designed to breach the United States nuclear defense system. If this processor were to be combined with the other briefcase, it would grant access to the country's nuclear arsenal, making it possible to launch an attack with just the press of a button. Meanwhile, Scott was still trying to track Johnny's location when, suddenly, he managed to pinpoint the briefcase's whereabouts. This was made possible because Gray had just accessed the processor. Hoping to secure his freedom, Scott wasted no time and immediately relayed Johnny's location to Frost. Acting swiftly, Frost contacted Nico and provided him with Johnny's location. Frost wanted Nico to retrieve the briefcase as soon as possible and eliminate Johnny in the process. 30 minutes later, Johnny, Gray, and Flynn were busy devising a plan to stop Frost. At one point, Johnny suggested that they should simply destroy the processor. Doing so would prevent Frost from ever using it again. In the end, both Gray and Flynn agreed. However, just as they were about to destroy it, Nico suddenly burst through the door, leading to an intense fight. During the struggle, Flynn managed to restrain Nico and ordered Johnny to take the briefcase and escape. But just as Johnny made his getaway, Nico broke free from Flynn's hold and immediately gave chase. It didn't take long before Nico caught up to Johnny near the parking lot, forcing them into a direct confrontation. As they fought, Johnny tried to reason with Nico, warning him that the briefcase contained nuclear capabilities that could lead to the deaths of millions. However, Nico remained unfazed and continued his assault. On the other hand, Flynn was also on the move, rushing to assist Johnny. Unfortunately, he was intercepted by two of Nico's allies, resulting in a 2-on-1 battle. Despite the disadvantage, Flynn managed to defeat both opponents and quickly headed toward Johnny's location. Back at the parking lot, Johnny and Nico were still locked in combat. Soon, Flynn arrived to back up Johnny, turning the fight into a 2-on-1 battle. However, Nico proved to be a formidable opponent, managing to overpower Flynn. At one point, he even seized Flynn by the throat, choking him, while Johnny lay weakened and unable to intervene. Desperate to save Flynn, Johnny made a difficult decision. He pleaded with Nico to let Flynn go, offering the briefcase in exchange. After a brief pause, Nico agreed, took the briefcase, and quickly fled the scene. An hour later, Johnny and Flynn returned to the house. Inside, they found Gray, who had just regained consciousness after being knocked out by Nico earlier. Without wasting any time, the three of them began formulating a new strategy. They needed to reclaim the briefcase, no matter what. During their discussion, Flynn suddenly asked Johnny why Frost harbored such a deep grudge against the government that he was willing to go to such extreme lengths. However, Johnny admitted that he had no idea. Throughout his time working for Frost, the man had never spoken about his motivations. As the night progressed, Flynn suggested that they all get some rest. The next morning, they would launch their mission to infiltrate Frost's base and take back the briefcase. The following day, Johnny, Flynn, and Gray were fully prepared to head to Frost's base. Despite being outnumbered, they showed no signs of fear, determined to save millions of lives. Once everything was set, the three of them wasted no time and set off toward Frost's headquarters. At the same time, Frost's right-hand woman, Anya, had just returned from California, carrying the first briefcase. She handed it over to Frost, who eagerly opened it. His face lit up with excitement as he combined the two briefcases. Now, with full control over the nuclear system, all it would take was a single press of a button to unleash destruction. However, Frost then revealed that he never actually intended to detonate the nukes. Instead, he planned to use the threat to blackmail the government into paying a ransom of $100 million. If the government complied, he promised to distribute $5 million to each of his subordinates. Just then, the sound of slow clapping echoed through the room as Flynn made his entrance. With a smirk, he asked Frost if he truly believed he had won. Frost confidently replied that he had, before asking who Flynn was. Flynn then simply stated that his identity didn't matter. What mattered was that he was there to put an end to Frost's crimes. Frost and his men burst into laughter, amused by the idea that a single person could stop them. However, their amusement was short-lived as Johnny stepped in, announcing that Flynn wasn't alone. Unbeknownst to them, Gray had already infiltrated the base, armed and ready. Without hesitation, he launched an attack, forcing Frost's men into battle. Amid the chaos, Frost attempted to escape with the nuclear launch briefcase, accompanied by Nico as his bodyguard. Determined not to let them get away, Flynn pursued Frost and managed to land a kick from behind, sending him stumbling. Gray quickly seized the opportunity to snatch the briefcase, but Nico was hot on his heels. Unfortunately, Nico caught up and pinned Gray down, preparing to finish him off. At one moment, Johnny arrived just in time, launching himself into combat against Nico. As they fought, Johnny shouted for Gray to take the briefcase to Scott, who was being held captive in the warehouse. He was the only one capable of deactivating the nuclear system. Without hesitation, Gray ran off while Johnny continued his brutal battle against Nico. Blow after blow, they exchanged strikes until, in a decisive moment, Johnny used Chun-Li's signature devastating strike, finally bringing Nico down. Meanwhile, in another part of the base, Flynn was locked in an intense fight against Frost. Despite Flynn's skills, Frost proved to be a formidable opponent. The battle raged on, but in the end, Flynn managed to overpower Frost and subdued him with a chokehold. At the same time, Gray had reached the warehouse where Scott was being held. Wasting no time, he handed over the briefcase and urged Scott to disable the nuclear launch system. Just as Scott was about to do so, Anya stormed in and opened fire. Both Gray and Scott scrambled for cover, dodging her bullets. A tense standoff ensued until Gray, seeing no other option, launched a daring attack against Anya, managing to knock her unconscious. With the threat neutralized, Gray quickly retrieved the briefcase and ordered Scott to shut down the nuclear system immediately. In the end, Johnny, Flynn, and Gray successfully thwarted Frost's plan to extort the government with the threat of nuclear disaster. 1 week later, Johnny was back home, rigorously training in martial arts. He pushed himself harder than ever, determined to improve his skills. While he was practicing, Flynn arrived with an offer. His superiors were looking to recruit one more agent, and he wanted Johnny to join him. Rather than remain unemployed, Johnny decided to accept the offer and step into the world of espionage. And with that, the story came to an end. Moral lesson from the story: don't trust a guy with a briefcase, especially if he's trying to bribe you with $1 million, because it's a bad decision. Also, if you're a mercenary, maybe don't ask what's in the briefcase. Ignorance is sometimes bliss, and less likely to get you pummeled by a secret agent.